school isn't easy for anyone, but it was especially not easy for me. As a cleft-lipped redhead, I suffered from nearly terminal bullying. I say nearly terminal because I thought I was only days away from ending my life. Then I met Greg. It was the fourth day in a row that my middle school bully, Larry, and his gang of thugs robbed me of my lunch money. I wonder if that face can get any flatter, Larry chuckled to the cowards that watched before sending my head flying into the lockers. I chuckled, too, through my tears as he led his crew away. I didn't care that he took my $3. Anything of true worth he took away from me long ago. I sat, alone, at the far corner of the cafeteria. I stared into the ripped sole of my black Converse All-Stars, losing myself in the empty darkness that lay within. My gaze was interrupted by a sudden snap of fingers inches from my face. Before looking up, I braced myself for the stranger's insult. I was met by concerned eyes. A student I hadn't met before sat his hot lunch across from me. He was an awkward teen, just beginning his journey to manhood. Wily and outrageous hairs curled and poked from his neck and sideburns. He smelled like puberty. "Can I sit here?" he asked as he lowered himself to the table. "I'm Skylar," I responded. "Hi, Skylar. It's nice over here. Can I sit here?" "Oh, yeah, go ahead." And he sat. "I'm Greg." This became a daily occurrence. Greg would plant himself next to me, occasionally sharing his pizza dipsticks or sloppy Joe sandwiches. We would make jokes about the good-looking kids and graffiti the lunch table and share stories. Greg moved around quite a bit, I had learned. He had more old schools and old towns and old friends than I could remember. It fascinated me. I began looking forward to a new story from Greg, telling another joke and sharing another laugh. Another quirk of Greg's that fascinated me was his apparent love for school lunches. Every day, once he had cleared his plate, Greg would lift the styrofoam to his face and scan for every crumb and trace of sauce. A glazed-over expression would possess his features until the wet sound of tongue on plate ceased, and then he would come back to me with another aside from his old town. One day, on a day like many others, I slunk between lockers and ducked under faculty after fourth period in a hurry to make it to lunch. I hadn't seen Larry so far that week and assumed he was out. So that day, I brought a few extra dollars for a full hot lunch. That day, I would have a plate of my own to lick alongside Greg. The lunch line stretched out the cafeteria doors and down the hall, and there stood Greg, wearing a goofy smile and holding my spot. I picked up my pace, striding as quickly as possible to my spot in line. It was then my Converse connected with a heavy mass, and I knew from second period physics that I had plenty of inertia. The trip sent me into the air. My hands lifted to shield my face, but the first thing to connect with the ground was my nose. I flinched when I hit the ground, but when I opened my eyes, all I saw was red. Blood soaked my face and hair and hands and clothes. I looked up to see Mr. Benson, chemistry, escorting Larry to the office. I felt my face, and pain shot through the bridge of my nose straight into my brain. Faculty surrounded me, and in a daze I was escorted to the nurse's office. Greg was with me in the nurse's office. He sat beside me as I lay there, bewildered and angry. My parents were on their way to pick me up. I had a broken nose. The nurse left for a moment, and Greg swiped some gauze from her desk. He moved his chair to the foot of the bed and began wrapping my shoe. On my way here, I saw Larry walking to the cafeteria. "Are you kidding me?" I wish I was. I heard him bragging to Kyle that he has in-school suspension for the rest of the week, starting tomorrow. "It's Thursday." I know. Greg looked to his wrap. It was snug but comfortable. He tore the gauze with his tooth and began on the other. "It looks like we're going to have to do this ourselves, then." Greg looked up to me expectantly. I laughed. "I'm not joking." His tone became grim. He couldn't take both of us. "Couldn't take both of us, Greg? I'm not fighting the guy, if that's what you mean. He'd sick his dogs on us. They would literally kill us. He already managed to make my face more flat. God, dude, sometimes I think you're insane. Just one time, Skylar. That's all it takes. You just have to show him one time that you can fight back. He will never mess with you again. To hell with his dogs. When they see his face after we're done with him, they want to be nowhere near him. That pathetic kid will make his face flat. Greg snapped at the gauze and tore it away from my foot. The nurse walked in, and Greg shoved the roll into his hoodie pocket. Your parents are here, darling, she told me. Do you need me to walk you out? And you can make your way to class now, young man. The lunch bell will ring any minute. I shook my head no and stood out of bed. Think about it, Greg told me, and he turned and walked out. I gazed at my Converse All-Stars, the holes sealed and my footing sure. I didn't need to think about it. I came to school the next day with no lunch money. Even if Larry didn't take it today, I wasn't hungry. At lunch, Greg told me his plan. Larry walks to school too. He seemed a bit excited. He lives on Cascade Street. He's the only 8th grader that does. That's where we wait. If we leave right after 7th period, then we can beat him home by plenty. Aren't you, nervous? I don't want to get in trouble. Did Larry get in trouble? No, but Larry didn't. Yeah, Skylar, I'm nervous. Greg finished his lunch, and I stared at him in silence as his eyes glazed over and he lifted the plate to his mouth. Today, it seemed, he enjoyed the plate more than the chicken fingers. When the lunch bell rang, he held out his hand. See you on Cascade? I took it and forced a smile. Greg and I were waiting only seconds before Larry turned the corner. From down the street, he yelled, Hey, it's Flatface and his boyfriend. Just couldn't stand a day without me, huh? Greg started walking towards him. I followed. I could see Larry's confident smile and lips and looked up to his nose. It made me angry. I didn't think Greg's arm was long enough to land the lick that he gave Larry. With the single blow, Larry's smile disappeared, and in one motion he flung the backpack off his back. He tackled Greg to the ground, and the two tumbled across the sidewalk. I walked over to Larry and grabbed him by the hair. He looked at me with anger. I hit him as hard as I could in the nose, and immediately blood began to pour. I held his hair tighter, and he looked to me again, this time with fear. I hit him again in the nose. That time, I felt it crunch under the weight of my fist. Greg crawled out from under him, and Larry started to cry. I started to cry, too. I turned and started walking home. From the end of the street, I heard Larry's cries grow louder. I turned, and Greg had him by the hair. He was looking directly at me. Larry begged me to make him stop and to leave him alone. I just watched. Greg rested Larry's head on the curb and lifted his leg high. Before I heard the crunch, I witnessed a mist of blood and teeth spray from Larry's face. He stopped crying. Greg didn't stop looking at me with those blank eyes, the eyes I only recognized from across our lonely lunch table when all his food was gone. I turned and ran home. Greg was right. Larry never messed with me again. I didn't get in trouble either. I don't know if Greg did. That afternoon was the last time I saw them. Greg saved me, not with friendship or loyalty, but with perspective. Middle school isn't easy for anyone, but it was especially not easy for my bully.